This is Title 18, Word Crimes. I'm Eric Arneson. Remember to subscribe to Word Crimes on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, please take a minute to rate Word Crimes on iTunes or Stitcher. This episode was recorded live at NoirCon 2014 in Philadelphia. One of the panels at NoirCon was 3 Minutes of Terror, during which about 20 authors read their work, the catch being that we each only had 3 minutes. If we ran over the time limit, our MC, Joe Samuel Starnes, had a chainsaw, Fisher-Price brand even, and he was not afraid to use it. Due to the quick-hit nature of the event, Joe didn't introduce each of the authors beyond announcing their names, but he did hand out a cheat sheet for the audience. Here on the podcast, I'll read the bios from that cheat sheet before each author reads their work. This is part 1 of 2 from 3 Minutes of Terror. Richard Godwin is the author of the critically acclaimed novels Apostle Rising, Mr. Glamour, One Lost Summer, Noir City, Confessions of a Hitman, and Meaningful Conversations. He was born in London and obtained a BA and MA in English and American Literature from King's College London, where he lectured.
This is from Meaningful Conversations about a well-adjusted serial killer whose therapist says he's the sanest man he knows. In this scene, he's about to abduct a woman driving a Volkswagen Beetle while he thinks about his wife, Anna. It's narrated by the killer. Anna is ever so adept at the unfortunate incident. She wears embarrassment like a tarnished chain. She's the blonde with the indigo eyes, tethered to an eternal craving. She exists silently somewhere beyond our marriage, acquiring the wardrobe of a Nazi's mistress, a solemn pledge locked upon her lips to offer rich and decadent pleasures in return for thrills. Within our marriage, she manufactures a certain sick decorum, and all the while she hungers for her mouth to be filled with sugar. Such is the bitterness she tastes. I wonder what the woman in the yellow Beetle is wearing on her feet as she stops at a crossroads and I take my moment. I accelerate and get in front of her, and on a deserted bend I slam on my brakes. She hits my Hummer. I get out and approach slowly as she rolls down her window. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she says. Her prominent lips are twitching, and I think of Donald Duck. Disney is such a comfort to me. But she has something I need, and it is more than the body will allow. "Making shoes," I say, just like Donald speaks, a gift for Anna. I have his accent perfectly. I rehearsed it in front of the bathroom mirror in my wetsuit. I hear the distant buzzing of a motorbike on the road below us. I estimate it to be a small bike, probably 125cc as it fades. "Are you mad driving like that? Don't you think all propositions are open to interpretation?" She is getting out her mobile phone when I pull it from my pocket. "Meet Kellen," I say. She stares at my phone and I stun her with it, locking it into the small blue vein that is throbbing on her neck. I watch her body go limp and slump behind the steering wheel of her Beetle. My stun gun phone gets them every time. I touch her neck. I finger her skin. I can feel the blood beneath. I can feel her steady, throbbing body under the dress she has on, some repro lacking both taste and erotic appeal. I will teach her how to dress, and she won't need clothes. She is light, and I lug her with her shopping to the Hummer. I drive her to the farm as the day becomes warm. There is the smell of burnt porridge in the air, and as people breakfast, I think of how she will look when I am finished with her. You can never tell. She stirs as the garage door closes on us, and I lean across the seat and dip my hand into her bag. She has some pink brandy Max Factor lipstick, and I rub it across her mouth until she looks like a clown. "Pretty," I say. "Come inside."
John McGoran is the author of the critically acclaimed ecological thrillers Drift and Dead Out, both from Tor Forge Books, as well as the novella After Effects, which is available on Kindle from Amazon's Storyfront imprint. Writing as D.H. Dublin, John is also the author of the forensic thrillers Body Trace, Blood Poison, and Freezer Burn.
Thanks. This is a short piece from a short story called Appetite. It's actually a little horror, but since it's Halloween, I figured what the hell. As soon as the camera came on, Morton Prince started in on me. Was I addicted to my own product? Had I concealed any side effects? Again and again, over and over, as if he wasn't going to stop until he got an answer. The premise is, is the first person. The guy invents a diet pill that basically makes him one of the richest men in the world. You can eat whatever you want, but then all of a sudden it turns out there are side effects. So this is his first television appearance when he realizes that he, as the first person on it, is starting to feel some of those. He stopped, but I don't think he got the answer he was looking for. He was calling me selfish and careless and negligent, so full of himself he couldn't stop talking to me even as I leaned across the table. Not until I clenched my teeth on his nose and bit down as hard as I could. The world might have forgiven me for that, but when I chewed it up and swallowed, I guess I crossed a line. I couldn't help myself. It was delicious, everything I had been missing in food and in life. The studio went silent. Morton Prince was in shock. Everyone else was staring at me like I was some kind of monster. I didn't care, not one bit. Prince started wailing, and the rest of them screamed bloody murder. They were right, too, because I went back for seconds. In the pandemonium, Frederick, my helper, hustled me out the back door and into our car. People seemed more interested in getting out of my way than stopping me. Frederick looked at me differently after that, but not completely so. He understood, the way a dog understands his master. He had known it was coming. The interview played nonstop everywhere, and I totally understood why. Prince looked ridiculous, even before I bit off his nose. Clearly, he was asking for it, but in that moment, before I finished him off, with his nose gone and his mouth quivering beneath it, he looked preposterous. The commentators said I was evil or insane, but even with the blood running down my chin, even after I went back for his cheeks, I thought I looked quite dashing. Eventually, a sex scandal knocked me out of the headlines, but things were never the same. I felt depressed, but not sad. I was resentful. A mysterious void in your life is one thing, but knowing what's missing and being unable to do anything about it is far, far worse. Then I was back in the headlines. "He's in Chicago," the television said, after a young woman was found with her face chewed off. 2 days later, they said I'd eaten someone in Boston. Then I turned up in Dallas and Detroit on the same day. They scratched their heads at that, but I didn't. I was expecting it. And if others were going to be out there satisfying their appetites, I would be damned if I was going to be denied. Frederick had a wariness in his face that I had never seen before, but he came running when I called. I sat him down and looked him in the eye. "Frederick," I said, "I'm hungry."
Anthony Neal Smith is a book writer, burrito eater, cheap wine drinker, fat guy. His books include All the Young Warriors, Yellow Medicine, and Hog Doggin'. From Mississippi, moved to Minnesota. Wife, dogs, cats. Did I mention fat guy?
Okay, World War II, Pacific Theater. You got it? All right. I would give everything I own never to see a jungle again, but I see it every night when I sleep. All these years later, and it's the same dream. Jungle, mud, bugs like helicopters, one biting a kid so bad he swelled up like a balloon and choked to death as we stood watching. The medic and the lieutenant slicing his neck, breathing into the hole, trying to keep him alive, but it was too late. He turned purple all over while his eyes were still flicking back and forth across our faces like drowning on dry land. And we couldn't turn away. We all watched him go. So that left me, the lieutenant, Villapanto, Fancy Mike, who liked to keep his hair just right, liked his uniform clean, Jitters, well, we all could have been called Jitters, but he was the smallest one, and a guy we called Horsecock, because, well, yeah. So it was a slog, the worst slog of my life, even up till now. Tree roots the size of a Buick, except covered with bugs that made sounds I'd never heard before. I swear some of them were speaking Japanese. The humidity, it was as if the sweat was in the air and you walked into it, streams of it from my scalp to my toes, more of it than water in my canteen. Vines that Jitters kept brushing against and flinching away from, and it's like they're trying to wrap me up, and we all laughed at him and called him a weepy pussy, but we felt exactly the same way. And then the booby trap impaled a loot with 20 sharpened bamboo spears, like an elephant-sized bear trap, rising from the jungle floor on the left and the right of the man, piercing straight through bone. The crunch was magnificently horrifying, and even through skull. He never made a sound. It was so fast. The trap stood upright for a moment before falling over sideways, tearing through vines and tree branches. We looked around, aimless kids in a jungle without a leader, until Horsecock said, "Is it me?" We thought about it and nodded at each other and said, "It depends on what your first order is." "Well, how about we get the hell out of here and tell the brass we didn't find the pricks?" So yes, we all agree that Horsecock was the best one to lead us the hell out of hell. Which was about when we got lost and stumbled upon the most awful spectacle I'd ever seen, even after seeing the lieutenant get killed. It was a clearing, a campsite, a fire going in the middle. 4 men sat around the fire, or at least that's what it looked like at first. Once we looked closer, smelled a little closer, heard the buzzing of a million flies, the pictures became much more clear. 3 dead men propped up by sticks and vines like puppets. Long dead, the gases having bloated them, split their skin and let the jammy blood and bile run free from every orifice. Some limbs were missing, but the bones nearby, tossed into a pile beside the fire, bits of meat left on them like they'd been cooked and eaten. I can't put what I smelled into words. We were all making choking noises, trying to hold back the inevitable. We all failed, of course, but that's why it took us so long to realize. There weren't 4 dead men by the fire, but 3. The 4th one said, "Can't you do the puking somewhere else? We've got to live here, fellas." We were still retching when we heard it, and we freaked out because we were still full of sick, streaming from our mouths and nose while trying to get our rifles aimed at whatever goddamn zombie son of a bitch was taunting us. By the time we got our bearings and our sights on him, he was gone.
Jonathan Woods is the author of the Spine Tingler award-winning Bad Juju and Other Tales of Madness and Mayhem, the crime novel A Death in Mexico, and the new collection Phone Call from Hell and Other Tales of the Damned. His story, Swingers Anonymous, has been made into a short noir crime film.
This segment is from my story Crash and Burn. It features Tiara Vega, wife of General Artemis Wade Vega, who heads a drug interdiction force along the Texas-Mexico border. Tiara has discovered that Artemis is sleeping around and decides to do something about it. Tiara Vega dreams an impossible Rube Goldberg device, marbles slaloming down chutes and spillways, a trap door opened by a hopped-up rat racing on a treadmill to nowhere, springing springs and whirling gizmos, a death's head beetle dragging a slab of marble up a slippery slope. The penultimate step in this nightmarish chain of events is the removal of the firing pin from a hand grenade, achieved by the gnashed teeth of a nude dentist swinging by his ankles in the grip of a gay Romanian trapeze artist. The grenade resides like an evil egg beneath the extra-firm, hyperallergenic pillow of Major General Artemis Wade Vega. Tiara jumps awake just before the explosion in her dream creates a blood and brains Rorschach splatter on the walls above their mutual bed. Tiara is in a sweat, her heart palpitating like an amphetamine-stoked rat. The other half of the bed is empty, uninhabited. The general is still absent, seeking telltale spoors of drug traffickers in the vastness of the Chihuahua Desert. She steps into a cold shower. Cascading darts of tepid water restore calm and rationality. She knows Artemis can't help himself. Like all men, he's a slave to his cock. He's always been a good provider and a decent fuck. Besides, I love Artemis, don't I? There has to be another way. Slipping a 9mm semi-automatic Glock pistol into her purse and securing the gimcrack lock of the married officer's housing she shares with Artemis, Tiara cranks her aging Dodge Charger into life. This baby could use a dose of Viagra, she thinks. At the main gate of Firebase Harry S. Truman, somewhere in the South Texas scrub, Sergeant Albert Ramos rests his serendipitous gaze upon Tiara's egalitarian cleavage. "You all drive safely, Mrs. Vega," he says. "Honey, I wouldn't have it any other way." She guns the supercharged engine, pops the clutch, and roars through the exit, splintering the wooden gate arm into a quartet of jagged-edged segments flying every which way. Well, shit, thinks Sergeant Ramus. They'll ream my ass for that.
Patricia Abbott has more than 100 stories in print. She is the author of the ebooks Monkey Justice and Home Invasion. Polis Books is publishing Concrete Angel and Shot in Detroit, both in 2015.
Hi, this is called Burnt the Fire, and it appeared in Shotgun Honey, which is a web zine. Coming out with us tonight, Pearl, Sam asked, poking his head inside her trailer. He caught a glimpse of her in the hazy moonlight just before the gauze curtains blew inward, obscuring her. The candle on the dressing table shivered. Her hands looked unusually white, but then he realized she was wearing elbow-length gloves. How many months had it been since he'd seen her without specialty makeup, long-sleeved blouses, outsized veiled hats? He blamed himself. It was he who came upon Ray in Miami and brought the two of them together. Ray wasn't like her other partners. He had a hair-trigger temper and acted on it. But Pearl liked his volatility, insisting it complemented her more docile demeanor. They looked good together, too. I don't have the heart for going out tonight, Sammy, she finally answered him, but tell the gang to have one on me. She reached for her handbag. Come just for a little while. It would do you good. I couldn't, not tonight. Let me see all of you for once. What he did to you, he said, voice shaking. What happened was between us. You shouldn't be defending him. We had a god of good years together, me and Ray. She looked around for reminders, but someone, Sam perhaps, had cleared Ray's things away. You can't fight what's natural, can you? When did we ever keep the bad stuff from each other? Maybe tomorrow I'll get dolled up and we'll walk the boards, ride the Ferris wheel after dark when it's magical. You ain't been out in the sunlight in years, Pearlie. She laughed, lighting her gas lamp. Some folks say too much sun ain't so good for a fair-skinned girl. Those bathing beauties letting their faces burn now just a passing fad. She shook her head. I've never liked the sun. She reached out a hand to pat his cheek, but the distance was too great. They listened as their friends assembled outside. You two coming, someone yelled. Go ahead with them, Sam. You putting salve on those wounds, right? Don't want any more scars. I really don't mind the scars. What, like war wounds? No, like medals. There was some pride or perhaps defiance in her voice. Shaking his head, Sam closed the door behind him. It was then that she raised the light on her lamp and methodically stripped down to her naked 50-year-old body as slim as on her 18th birthday. But there the resemblance ended in a frightening show of ruined flesh. Ray and the six that came before him had made a mess of her. The older scars resembled tattoos, raised tattoos where flesh had been sewn back together inexpertly, sometimes by her own hand, sometimes by an amateur surgeon, once by poor Sam, in fact, but it had never been like this before. She was raw meat. Ray went crazy in Iowa City last month. It wasn't really his fault. She had slipped on the mud brought on by a week's worth of rain and fell on top of him in the ring. In a rage, he almost ripped off her leg, lacerated her in a dozen places, tore her left eyelid off. He had been shot on the spot. A man in a straw hat stood up in the bleachers, let out a roar to rival Ray's, and fired the gun. She had heard the screech of that bullet from some faraway place, somewhere the pain had taken her. Their 10 years together came to an end in an instant as Ray slumped to the ground. The crowd cheered, then booed, and then a low keening began. It was her voice as she looked at her cat, the last tiger she'd ever owned, the last cat she would share her trailer with, the ring, a life. She really hadn't minded the scars, but Ray's carnage, she couldn't live with that. The one possession of Ray she had salvaged was his pearl-studded collar, which she put around her waist. Reaching out, she toppled the gas lamp and threw the candle into the curtains. In seconds, fire rushed across the small room. She didn't mind it when the fire began to nip at her. Ray had prepared her well.
David James Keaton's fiction has appeared in more than 50 publications. His collection, Fish Bites Cop, Stories to Bash Authorities, was named Collection of the Year by This Is Horror. His debut novel, The Last Projector, was released in November.
Hello. So the scariest thing I could think of was a fight scene in this book where there's an altercation on the set of an adult film, and one of the guys is naked. I figured that's always terrifying. Larry could never watch an entire basketball game. There were too many stupid tattoos in a basketball game, too many dinosaurs doing reverse slam dunks and burning basketballs, speckling their shoulders like a disease. Although filmmakers had taught him The tattoos looked a little better on black men, maybe a little less like someone with magic markers had caught them passed out at a party, and more like the noble shading around the arms and shoulders you get from working hard under a car all day. Sort of what they were doing on the courts, sort of what they were doing on the set, but nah, it wasn't like a disease. It is a disease. Larry worked through it all best he could, though, with these tattoos, getting all the reaction shots, remembering that Clint Eastwood movie about the book about the movie The African Queen, where Clint played John Wilson playing John Huston, explaining to anyone who would listen that Hollywood was simply a factory town, just like Detroit. So true. The intersection of North Hollywood Boulevard Road and South Florida Street was where Larry was shooting today. It was getting done until he started to obsess over the Sammy tattoo again. That wasn't the character's name. Starting to wonder if there was a way they could cover it up, maybe with a beach towel, a houseplant, maybe a fire. Then he noticed the Sammy was beginning to smear with the sweat and the friction. He couldn't believe it. Tattoos were so popular now that people were apparently faking them with a ballpoint pen. Sammy turned into Hammy, then turned into Amy. There was no Amy in this fucking movie either. It was more than he could take. Before he knew what he was doing, Larry had a forearm under Joe's throat and was throwing him back over a crackling plastic-covered sofa. "Joe, hold this." He delivered a hard shot to Joe's nose, the locomotive punch he'd learned from the fist of the Virgin Mary's strapping lumberjack of a grandson earlier that morning, sending a starfish of black blood across his cheeks. "But how did you know my name?" Susie was trying to ask, but Joe soaked up the blow, then hit Larry back about 15 times while Larry was thinking about Susie's question. And Joe could fight. The fucker was scrappy. They're always in good shape, every appendage red and well-muscled. And as Joe beat him into a defensive curl, he found himself eye to eye with the angriest end of his actor. Back when Larry first started doing commercials, they warned him that the camera always added 10 pounds. But in porn, it turned out that the camera took off 3 inches. But Joe still looked good. Larry covered his head deeper and deeper underwater in the fight. Porn kids were tougher than they looked. He heard they were about a year from fucking modified holes in their faces. Glenn swore he'd seen this in spite of it making no sense biologically. And this was Glenn talking, one of the business's foremost anal pioneers. They wrote it off as something they'd never understand, shrugging, "Every generation adds a new hole." But they all had the same weaknesses. Desperate under the barrage of body blows, Larry finally fell back on what he knew. "Skin always wins," his gym teacher told him once. Not today. He grabbed Joe by his erection, catching it before it could turtle all the way back into his body for safety. No one believed it later, but Larry actually picked him up with it, held him off the ground, like one of those retractable tape measures you would unspool just to see how long it could hover in midair before it collapsed. There was enough blood in it to bend until snap.
Jedediah Ayers is the author of Peckerwood, Fierce Bitches, and A Fuckload of Shorts. Blah, blah, blah. No awards or nominations. Blah, blah. Not even one. Blah, blah, blah. Not bitter. Blah, blah, blah. Not at all. No, really. Blah, blah, blah. Over it.
Fuck you, Keaton. This is the worst slot any reader could get. Lost my place. The retard was well past lit for the 5th straight night and cranking a fucking harsh calliope waltz out of Ramon's jangled nerves. The pleasure Ramon took from beating his ass was beginning to lose its sharp edge, becoming just another duty. Collect the trash, take out the cash, beat the retard's ass. With a sigh, he grabbed his bat from behind the bar and walked across the cantina's concrete floor to where the dipshit gringo was harassing some of the whores. He beat the retard's ass, tossed him out, again. Later, he took Consuela to his bed and silently articulated his frustrations to her. His facial expressions changed with glacial speed, and she watched with the patience of a saint. From across the mat, Ramon smoking while she languidly stroked his bare chest with her nails, ceasing and retreating at just the right time, resuming occasionally. Ramon didn't even bother trying to get it up, but he liked listening to her not say anything. The truck rumbled up to the cantina early the next morning, and he dressed, unaware of all the small things he was doing for the last time, running his tongue over straight teeth, walking without a limp, following orders. Hauling a case of liquor between them, Ramon and the driver shuffled through the cantina's entrance where he met the retard's eyes, hiding just inside the doorway with the other gringo. Is that a bottle in his hands? When Ramon awoke, his jaw was broken and the retard was already dead. Splayed on his back, a euphoric expression writ across his wasted face. His nose looked to have been driven backward into that swamp of fuckwit he called a brain. And thus he was beyond reach for the revenge Ramon was so plainly owed. Ramon's head was engulfed in flame. The pain of his injuries, the swelling, his fractured bones, stoking a fever of unprecedented height. The awful sunlight, his face running away from him in 6 different directions, and the shrieking of the horrors resounded infinitely between his ears, building and intensifying into an ecstatic cacophony. Metcalf, the retard, had busted out along with the other gringo. They beat him down, broke his face, mopped up the take. The other gringo had killed Metcalf's ass and split with that ugly crater-faced puta he'd been keeping warm. Polito would find them and gut the lovers, fuck their entrails, that was a fact, but then what would he do with Ramon? Ramon had been Polito's custodian for nearly 5 years, supervised the whores, kept the gringos in line, ordered and sold goods, everything the guests and employees needed. Mr. Greaser Whipple. He knew what the hell it was, he knew what hell was. It was playing butler, nurse, and janitor for a bunch of entitled, ass-licking gringos, being a middle management toady between Harlan Polito and a gaggle of crab motel jizz mops in the desert. Mr. Beaner Belvedere. Fucking hell.
Marshall Stein's noir thriller, Rage Begets Murder, is set in bandstand-era Philadelphia. Jerry Healy called it an author's tour de force. Marshall is a retired lawyer. He was an assistant U.S. attorney and later the chief staff attorney for a federal appeals court.
This is from Rage Begets Murder. It's a police interrogation of a man who's been caught with an album of topless photos of girls from the teenage dance show. Johnny, look at you, blubbering like a baby. I hate to see Italians like you. Rebelli's fist caught Furtado in the chest, just over his heart. Johnny, don't force your breathing, Rebelli said. It makes it worse. God, your lips are turning blue. Terry, help him breathe again. Singh spread his hands under Furtado's rib cage and pulled lightly, released and pulled again. Rebelli put his thumb thick as a carrot on the white shirt. Furtado winced. Johnny, if I push, it'll hurt like hell. You'll piss in your pants again, maybe shit. Your nose will be filled with your own stink. I'm asking again. What's the name of the guy giving the orders? Vince. His name is Vince. I don't have a last name. Rebelli nodded. We'll come back to that. Do you know Eddie Green? The guy on TV, Furtado smirked. Rebelli's open hand shot out. Furtado's mouth and eyes popped. He shrieked, "Oh shit, why'd you do that? I'm answering." Rebelli tapped his finger against Furtado as he spoke. Johnny, I hate guys who give me lip, especially Italian guys who give us a black eye. I want to know if Green is part of the group. Furtado's tongue licked the mucus off his upper lip. He replied, Green's never talked to me. I've seen Vince and him talk. What about? Rebelli asked. They always talk away from me. Rebelli's hand grabbed Furtado by the throat. Johnny, listen to me. You can't breathe. I'm going to squeeze your life in my hand. Then when I let go and you get some air, you're going to tell me everything you know. I won't ask another question, and you'll be scared to stop talking. Rebelli's hand grew white as he tightened his hold on Furtado. Hear the pounding in your ears, Rebelli said. Feel the pressure on your forehead? Your heart's beating like a rabbit. The thing is, I could make a mistake here. Choke you too long. Happened once. Autopsy showed the guy had a stroke. You don't want to die, Johnny. I'm going to let go now. Furtado slumped in Singh's arms. Singh whispered, Christ almighty, you killed him. Rebelli put his ear next to Furtado's mouth. There's a little whistle. He'll live. This time. Johnny, shake your head when you can talk. Don't make me do this again. The skin on Furtado's neck fluttered.
That was 3 Minutes of Terror, recorded live at NoirCon 2014 in Philadelphia. Thanks again to Joe Samuel Starnes for organizing the event. It was great fun. Joe is the author of the novel Calling, published by Mysterious Press in 2014, and the upcoming Red Dirt, a tennis novel, scheduled to be released in spring of 2015 by Breakaway Books. On the next episode of Word Crimes, we'll have part 2 from 3 Minutes of Terror. You can find links to all of the authors featured on this episode and more in the show notes on my website, ericarneson.com. That's ERIKARNESON.com. Every episode of the Title 18 Word Crimes podcast is archived at ericarneson.com. I'm also at Eric Arneson on Twitter and easy to find on Facebook. And that's all for this episode of Title 18 Word Crimes. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. The music on this episode is by The Throws. You can find them at The Throws, THROES, thethrows.com. Thanks again for listening to Title 18 Word Crimes. We'll be back soon.